The Art and Science of Filmmaking has just been released in ebook form.
Right.
Yeah. First of all, give me a sense of your beginnings in the industry, because if I understand correctly, you were really the first producer slash manager.
Yeah, I invented that job in the movie business.
With Blake Edwards. That was your first, Yeah,
I mean, it's an interesting story. I met Blake in group therapy, and in the same group I met my wife, Sally Kellerman, and I met Frank Geary, who ultimately built my house for me.
Wow.
And it was a great group, and it was also great psychologically. But I went to Blake after I saw the lay of the land in his life, and I was an international tax law doing the Saltines tax shelters around the world for Superman. And Peter Hoffman was doing the same thing at Irela Manila with me. And he went to Yale Law School, and I went to Yale Law School. So, but after 2 years, I got very bored with it, but I stayed another 2 years, and I represented a lot of directors and stuff. And then I read Jennifer Jones, who was in the group, gave me the David Selznick book. And what I did was I reasoned inductively first, from the few to a general rule, and then from the general rule to the many, deductively. And if I got anything out of law school, because I always tell people what I got out of law school is nothing that would contribute to my being a producer, but actually it did contribute to my writing the book. The book is like a Newtonian Principia. Mm-hmm. And I just got fed up after 30 years of the lying. People lie because they don't know their job functions, or if they know their job functions, they're very insecure about losing their jobs. And lying, Immanuel Kant says, in the Second Critique, the categorical imperative is don't lie, because the society can't exist. What we have here is a century-old business that's unregulated, accidental, and Darwinian. And it runs by itself. And it's ineffective because of that. I mean, the return on investment in the movie business is very low, and there's a lot of independent financiers. And I've been, when I started the producer-manager, I produced films, and then I started a management company. The management company, and I had 150 director and actor clients within 2 years. See, one of the principles of the book is the three sources of power: production, production, distribution, and talent. Those are the three sources of financing, and you can explain anything in the industry if you understand that. You can understand packaging, you can understand what an agent or a manager does, you can understand, where's the money, the cash flow from all media. And I realized that, so I went to Blake, who hated the studios, and I said, look, I'll handle your finances from a foreign tax point of view, because Julie Andrews was an alien. And I'll fix them up if you let me be this producer-manager of yours. And he said, yes. So I went to Europe, and they were making like 2% on foreign equities when T-bills were 17%. So I liquidated everything and put them in 17% T-bills, and that was a big move, and he made the deal. I was his producer and manager, and it was not an easy job because Blake was not an easy guy. But I learned fast. I mean, within a year, I was making 2 Pink Panther films at the same time in Europe. One was called The Trail of the Pink Panther, and that used outtakes from Peter Sellers, and he gets lost, and then we brought in Ted Wass to be the new incompetent detective, and he finds Peter Sellers. But I remember I've been now a producer-manager for 6 months. I'm sitting in the Hotel de Cap in Cap d'Antibes near Cannes. That's where all the big shots go in Cannes during the Cannes Film Festival. But it was empty because it was February. And they were threatening to sue me because the movies went over budget. So Beagleman and Rothman came from UA and for 13 hours in the lobby grilled me. Now, I wasn't the line producer, not a line producer. That's a production manager.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a glorified production manager. And I had to figure out a way to make them comfortable because we were already going to go over budget and it looked like we were going to continue. So what I did was Blake had a gross deal on these films at an actual break even. And I said, Blake, one of them is $2 million, the other one is $12 million. Change the $2 million film to a net deal. That will convince them we won't go over budget anymore. Because if you have a $2 million film on a 50% of the net, that can make a huge amount of money. Mm. And he had already gone through that with 10 because he wanted to use Dudley Moore, who was in the group, instead of George Segal. And Orion, at that point, Meta Voice Company, you know, Orion said, okay, but you have to work for free, but we'll give you 50% of the net. And he made $19 million on 10. He would never have made it if it wasn't gross deal.
Wow.
But the funny thing is that, I mean, I was baptized under fire, man.
Yeah.
And to put a little pin in it, after we finished post-production, Beagleman and Rothman were fired, and Freddie Fields took over. So Blake says to me, go tell Freddie I want my gross deal back. I go to his house, I say, Freddie, Blake wants his gross deal back. I said, fine. So, just an example of the accidental nature of the industry.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think of the famous, it's kind of often quoted, by this time it's probably misquoted, quote of William Goldman, who said, you know,
right.
No one knows anything, essentially. But, I mean, I'm sure that you would argue against that because you do believe there is a science to this.
Yes, I do definitely believe there's a science to it. But people have to the insiders, the top insiders have to redo the way they do business. I mean, they have to give younger people more power because they're so scared they're going to lose their jobs that they nay everything. They naysay everything. They barely ever give anything a good review because they'll be afraid that if the film flops, they'll get fired. And, in fact, that happens. And that just makes for job insecurity and lying. Mm. So what I try to do is I broke the movie industry down to 5 principles. And then I explain all 5 principles hopefully clear and with some funny anecdotes. And so that people can understand them not just in a void. See, one of the problems with the movie industry, another problem is most of the teachers have not been on the line, have not been producers, and most producers can't teach. Mm. So I was a professor at the UCLA Extension School for 15 years, and then I started my own film school in Florida, where I was for like 5 years. And it was an innovative school, and I'm going to start it up again in Los Angeles slowly because I have 4 pictures that I'll be making next year, and I'm happy to be getting back involved in making movies. But what I was is, I took my management company and production company that I had with Blake, and I bought a foreign sales company, Manson International, and I had investment bankers to take us public. And I was the youngest chairman CEO on NASDAQ. And we had the highest performing entertainment stock in 1989. Wow. And but I've owned 3 home video companies. I've owned Manson International, big foreign sales, and then I bought from Branson. I bought Virgin Vision, which had 8 actual foreign distribution companies, not sales agents. So, and I've been a distributor of films in every media worldwide. I've been a foreign sales agent. I've written books. I've written 3 of the scripts of the 50 scripts I've made. Movies I've made. 3 of them were ones I wrote. And I've been a manager, a lawyer. I graduated from Yale Law School, and I just loved how I got out of that. When Blake said yes, I just didn't come back to the law firm.
Yeah,
I went to his office, and I just started to work with him. Go ahead.
You really have done it all, and you're coming at the film profession from a variety of interests that you've had.
Yeah.
But I'm curious in terms of when you think of the structure that produces great, profitable films.
Yeah.
What are you? Is there some period in the past that you're kind of modeling it on? Because we obviously, when in the 40s and such, we had the studio heads. Yeah.
Yeah. No. What I did with my public company is I did a 40s style studio. It's where you have the 3 sources of power under one roof. In the 40s, they had talent under loan-out contracts. Then they had distribution because they distributed their own films, and they had production and production financing because they did it themselves. So the 40 studios had all 3 sources of power in one roof. Lou Wasserman did it with his agency, and then he bought Universal. Now, that was declared illegal. Agents can't produce, but no one thought about managers producing. So I took my management company as my talent source, and I took my production company as the production source, and then I bought a foreign distribution company, and then 3 home video distribution companies, and then I started in my public company, I had a theatrical distribution company. I had like 100 men and women to theatrically distribute films domestically. And so my paradigm is the 40 system again, all 3 sources of power under one roof, but I'm not going to go back to management to do it. It's way too intense. So what I've done is I've made relationships with writers and directors where they will work for me very inexpensively until the film is funded, and then I give them higher than they would have gotten anywhere else. So that's how I have talent, is through goodwill contracts, not written contracts, but goodwill oral contracts, that they will work for me for what I can afford, and then I pay them bigger than they would have gotten, and I make writers co-producers, and I make talent, if they were involved with me at the beginning, directors or actors, and I give them more money. So the way I got talent now is through this kind of stable of people that I think are excellent, who work for me for the green light, before the green light. And they work for very little. So I don't have to be a full-fledged development company. And they find me scripts, and then I rewrite them if they need rewriting. And that's how I get my scripts, is I'm one of the few people that takes unsolicited scripts. And if they're good, and, I'll rewrite them myself, and sometimes I'll rewrite them with one of my writers. So, and I'll tell you why I do take unsolicited scripts, because everybody, if you have a hit film, everyone comes out of the woodwork to make a claim on it. A friend of mine had an office next door to this producer and obviously stole it. And they even make it when it's a true story, people make those claims. And I make them sign a release and awareness of the release and all that legal stuff. But I don't want to pass up a really good script if there's a couple out there. And there have been. I have 4 really good scripts right now. And hope to start making 3 of them in January.
Well, I want to ask you about some of your projects, both past and future, but a couple of questions about the state of the industry now and what you would do to remedy some of the problems here. First of all, in my book, I talk about everybody has to have a defined job function. The studios have to define what the executives do, and then they have to follow through. So the executives, from young to old, don't have to lie anymore.
to people. Yeah, we're reading your script on weekend read, and we'll get right back to you. And 6 weeks later, they haven't called. Or they'll call and say, I mean, it's not just studios. It's the independent, small companies, and it's just lawyers, producers, directors. I mean, everybody tells other people either what they want to hear, and then nothing happens, or they tell them what they don't want to hear, and nothing happens. People don't follow through with what they've said. So, first, I think I've addressed this in my books because one of the titles was After the Art and Science of Moving, How to Fix the Accidental Industry. Mm-hmm. And through the use of the 5 general principles that are in the book, I think it can be fixed, but it has to be fixed both from the ground up, bubble up from youngsters, and from the high down, so that the middle of the industry gets it and has to change the way they do business. And then there are criteria, as my book says, for what I call a right script and a right film using the right actors and directors. There are objective criteria. People say, oh, yeah, I just read it, and if I like it, then I'll make it or try to make it. Well, liking it has to be defined. And there's 8 creative criteria for what a right script is. And I put that in my book, and that comes from my 30 years in show business and making 6 movies that made over $100 million. Mm-hmm. And then another 44 movies, all of which have done. One investment banker did a analysis of my films, and on the 50 films, the average return on investment on my movies, they told me, was 300%.
Mm.
So,
whatever you have, it's a winning formula.
It seems to be.
Yes.
It seems to be. But one of the difficulties is that, the studios don't really have production deals anymore. They don't want to spend movie on development. So you have to find scripts somewhere. And in my book, I say where to find them. And the best place to find them is on the studio shelves that have abandoned them.
Mm.
I mean, when we made The General's Daughter, it had been on the shelf for 7 years.
Wow.
And then when Paramount hired me, it went into pre-production 6 weeks later.
Mm.
Because I just followed my rules. I hired a whole new writer, and the director, the writer, and the star, we all went to a hotel and stayed there until we had rewritten it. And the same with Swordfish. Even when scripts come out good, there are still problems with them, and you have to catch those problems.
Right.
It sounds amateurish, the dialogue sounds affected, the twist at the end isn't powerful enough. All these things have to be fixed. And if you don't, the movie will fail. And one of the other critical factors is everyone you hire has to have the same vision on the film, a shared vision.
Uh-huh. And
the lying problem is to get jobs, a lot of people will say they agree with the vision, and then start directors and stars do this sometimes, and start making a different movie. I mean, I was involved with a huge independent film, an action film, and early on in the film, the director was directing for comedic effect, and I had to stop it immediately because that wasn't what we were doing. So you have to have a shared vision, and the people have to not lie about it and just say yes, but have their own vision that they're going to do when they're producers or directors.
Do you think it's a problem, and me not being on the inside of the industry necessarily, I'm not sure if this charge is valid. But back in the 40s, that studio system that we're talking about now, those studio heads and executives, they knew about making movies. And,
yes.
And the charge now is that many executives and studio heads don't necessarily know about making movies.
Yes. That is another accidental Darwinian aspect of the industry, that people are hired that don't know anything about making movies, but they hire them for their budget, financial control.
Mm-hmm.
Their ability, they've run companies before and they've kept the budgets down. That's what they get hired for. And it's not the right criteria for hiring a studio head. A studio head has to have been making a lot of films and have his hands in the nitty-gritty. I mean, I'm the lead producer on these films, and when I go to the set, man, if we're lacking a grip, I'll be a grip for a day. I kind of like moving the lights around.
Uh-huh.
Kind of a comic relief. I mean, you got to know the business inside and out, and that comment is valid.
Okay.
It is valid, and it's just another accidental thing. And people say the movie business is a crapshoot, and I say wrong. It is a crapshoot and accidental up for the last 100 years, but it doesn't have to be. It can be like any other manufacturing thing. It can be.
Well, and it sounds to me like the way you go about financing pictures is very responsible. I mean, do you see a lot of waste now with studio films?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and here's a funny little story on that very point. When Blake made, let's say, The Man Who Loved Women with Burt Reynolds,
uh-huh.
the remake of the Truffaut film, and I was the producer on it, he came to me and said, I have to have 8 weeks to shoot this. I have to, or I'm not going to make it. I said, okay, I'll get you 8 weeks. That's the top of the lot, at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Cut 20 years later, I made 2 films with Nora Ephron, Michael and then Lucky Numbers. Making Lucky Numbers, so I have dinner with her, and I worked with her before, and she says, Jonathan, I have to have 17 weeks to make this movie. And Blake had given me the 8 weeks thing 20 years earlier. She said 17 weeks to make a comedy. And I said, you have to have 17 weeks? I mean, that's a lot of shooting for a comedy that takes place in one little city. But she said she had to have it. So, this is where my management expertise comes in, because if she didn't get it and I hocked her down to 14 weeks, she would be so pissed off, who knows what would happen. But the point of the story is Blake makes it for, made The Man Who Loved Women in 8 weeks. She made Lucky Numbers in 17 weeks. That is a very good example of the irrationality of this industry.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And the studio heads do not like to alienate big stars or star directors. Now, they will fire them if they're doing egregious stuff, but they don't want to fire stars, and they don't want to fire top directors. So they rely on me to fix it, because I'm a producer and a manager, so I know how to deal with stars. So Paramount was my favorite place, before everyone got fired. And I had great respect and I had great support from Sherry Lansing, John Goldman, and Rob Friedman. And they basically would only call. They didn't ever come to the set. They would call me if they thought something in the dailies wasn't right, or some department looked like it was going over budget, and I went and I fixed it. And The General's Daughter, for example, I just love that movie.
Me too.
Did a great job, but another funny story is we're shooting in this tower with a black chick who's an army chick, and she's telling us about things.
Uh-huh.
And we hear explosions down below. And I had to say, cut. And I said, Simon, what are these explosions? Oh, I forgot to tell you, or anyone, that I'm having war games going on while we're solving this murder mystery. I said, okay, it's a good idea, but you should have told me. And I got it cleared. I liked the idea. It was brilliant. Simon West is a brilliant director. And I got it cleared. But it was just funny, that he didn't tell anybody. And we had bombs going off during the scene.
Do you feel that the business is changing in that it is not as star driven as it used to be?
Oh yeah, all the big stars have had a lot of flops. Every one of them. Some of them have had a lot of flops. There is not one star that can open a movie. When I say can open a movie, I mean any movie.
Uh-huh.
Like when I was with Travolta for 15 years, we got to a place where every movie in the plan, the business plan, our management plan called for him, because he has such a range, to do separate types of movies. And they all made $100 million at least.
Yeah.
So, but he had respect for the fact that the studio had liked me because I acted like a fiduciary. I acted like it was my money, not like it was some bad studio's money. And I stayed on budget, And if the director wanted to do something that was going to push a department over, I called the studio head immediately, explained the situation, and 9 times out of 10 they gave me the extra money. But a lot of producers don't do that. They just let it go over.
Right.
And then kind of tap dance around the problem. Honesty is the best policy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you find though that there's the art of filmmaking and then there's the business of filmmaking?
Right.
Do you find at all that those two sides of the same coin, they're opposed to one another, or are they usually? Yeah.
If they're done right, they are complementary. Because when you talk about the business of filmmaking, you're talking about making contracts with stars and directors and producers, and those contracts are very complicated. They're not deal memo things, because stars have entourages and they have all sorts of requests, and you have to give them to them. And when you talk about business, you also talk about distribution, and distribution is changing because of the digital age. Mm-hmm. Soon there will be direct satellite distribution into high-definition television projectors in theaters. There will be no projectionists. This already exists in some chains, some small chains, but that is definitely where it's going. And video on demand and pay-per-view is happening. Video on demand will come out day and date with the film, and they'll charge $24 to see it, as if 2 people were going to the theater.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the average ticket price is $12. And pay-per-view is still $4, but it's way past the theatrical, and it's past even the DVD when it hits pay-per-view. Video on demand is going to be day and date, or just a few days later with the theatrical. Now, people argue, boy, that's going to dilute the theatrical. And I say no, because they're 2 different experiences. The theatrical experience is a shared experience in the dark with strangers with a 30-foot screen or smaller. And home video is a program. You are a programmer. It's an impulse buy. Uh-huh. When you're in Target, you see it, you buy it. And then at home, you say, oh, I want to see that movie. Freedom of programming. Yay! And in 1980, I was on Financial News Network with one of the top analysts on Wall Street, and they did a white paper that said video would be worth nothing through the end of the millennium. And like 2 days later, the guy that started Vestron, he had started HBO, I can't remember his name, but Vestron came out with a zillion titles because he got the ownership in the library of HBO. So in any event, you have a lot of differences of opinion, but one of the things that I try to do in the book is at least lay out the issues. And then I tried to lay out some solutions to the issues. And in the last 2 chapters, I try to deal with the 2 biggest problems there are in the industry. The first being you cannot predict what theatrical is going to do. So unlike other industries where they can test market, you can't test market a film because by the time you have it, I mean, you do research screenings, but that's not the same as test marketing because they don't have the money and they're afraid to go out full blast, even in a territory like New Mexico, and see. So in my book, I say, this is how you do it. You make a 30-minute short, and you put that in theaters, and you put it in college auditoriums, and you test the 30-minute short. Now, the other benefit of it is you get to see how it plays, and if the premise is smart, and on the films I'm making, I'm going to do that. And in my Krane Academy of Motion Pictures, that's one of the things we did, is we made this short. And what happened was the short turned out very bad. The concept was bad, and Disney came out with the same movie right before we came out. So I put the students on the film so they graduate with a producer credit. So it's an innovative film school approach. You don't just leave with a short film under your arm that no one will see. You leave with having worked on a film as some kind of a producer. So
that is a good idea.
Yeah.
But in terms of the theatrical experience, I mean, the argument is that it will be relegated to only the event pictures.
Yeah, the real tentpole movies. And that now, I say that's happening, but then there are movies that are in the budget range that I'm talking about. The Vow with
the Channing Tatum.
Channing Tatum and that girl that's so good. I think she won an Academy Award. Rachel McAdams.
Yes.
That was a $30 million film, and it did $150 at the box office.
So, Magic Mike just recently, a huge success. Yeah.
So my budgets are between 30 and 40, and we'll go out with $20 to $30 million in P&A, just like the studios, and I'll use a studio. I'll rent a studio system. I've done that before. And they're happy to have the product, and they don't have to put up any money, but you'll get a 10 to 12% fee on domestic. I hold foreign. I do not pre-sell foreign to finance my films because, you only get a fourth of what you'll get if you hold on to it until after you release theatrically. On a normal picture, if you hold on to foreign, 60% of your revenue comes from foreign and 40% from the U.S. If you pre-sell foreign, it's the opposite. So when I make my pictures, I raise the money all equity. I don't even do gap financing, which is, the banking of all the little territories, and estimate that they're 3 times as much, and the bank will give you a third. That's been a useful technique to gap to get some of the financing to basically foreign pre-sales. But the big territories, the studios don't pre-sell them because they know how much they can get. Big deals are in foreign television because foreign theatrical is having the same problems we are. Our movie stars are stars in various countries abroad, and they still love seeing them. In America, we have evolved to a somewhat righteous position in that we have smart audiences. If they hear a big movie stinks, they won't go. In America, there are some foreign territories that if a star is involved, people will still go theatrically.
Right.
So in the rest of the world, they're a little behind us. There's still marquee value. One thing I teach, and I wrote in my book, is you have to send people out of the theater, feeling better than when they went in. If you do that, you get word of mouth. And I related to Socrates' book on the symposium, where they talk about what is love. And Socrates says, love is the desire to show one of your loved ones truth and beauty. That's word of mouth. So when you see a great movie, you can't wait to tell your friends to see it, because it's an automatic human genetic response that you must share when you see something that is truly beautiful, and that word of mouth is what makes a movie a hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about your next projects that you're getting off the ground,
yeah.
You said that you have 3 or 4 that you're planning to do.
4. Yeah.
In terms of content, like what avenues excite you? What kind of genre?
Oh, I'll tell you. I have a mafia thriller that I wrote. I wrote with one of my stable of writers, but then when he gave me the script, he did what I wanted. I wrote the story. Then I rewrote it to add a huge subplot into it. And my financiers, I can't tell you who they are because I can't risk other people going to them.
Right.
But they want to do 6 movies with me next year in the 30 to 40 range. And the guy has financed 70 films, so he's real.
Wow.
But my picture on the Mafia thriller, they have ex-studio executives reading scripts and distributors reading scripts. It got a 10. And the 2 other pictures, which are romantic comedies but with fish out of water aspects, which is the most successful genre, is fish out of water comedy, got the 9 pluses. And they told me that they had never had film score that high, script score that high. So they're happy. And
wow.
I was happy when I heard that,